What's up, everyone? My name is James Lynch. This is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to take a look at the UFC Fight Night main event on May 14th between former light heavyweight champion Jan Blachowicz and Aleksandar Rakic. This fight was rescheduled. Thankfully, we're going to get to see this fight in next Saturday, actually, at the time we're recording this. But before we get into the stats, my pick, the preview, etc., make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. That way you won't miss any updates on this channel. I am posting content on here every single day. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. And let me know what you think after this video. Who are you siding with? Who do you think wins this fight? Okay, let's get into it. Jan Blachowicz, Aleksandar Rakic, like I mentioned, fight was supposed to take place on March 26th in the main event. That ended up being Curtis Blades and Chris Daukaus. Blachowicz suffering a neck injury. We'll get into that a little bit later here, but a really exciting fight and a lot of implications in the 205-pound division. This fight's going to be taking place at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. So smaller cage. We'll see who that favors in the matchup, but obviously that's one sort of interesting thing here. But thankfully, this is going to be 5 rounds as opposed to 3 rounds. Let's take a look at the tail of the tape between both guys here quickly, and then we'll dig into it. Jan Blachowicz is 39 years old. Aleksandar Rakic, 30 years old. 6'2" compared to 6'4", 78-inch reach. They have the same reach, I should say, at 78. And obviously the big age gap there with Rakic just being 30 years old and Jan Blachowicz being 39. 28-9 record compared to 14-2. Blachowicz having a lot more MMA experience overall. It's Poland versus Austria in this main event. Okay, let's start first with the former light heavyweight champion, Jan Blachowicz. Let's dig into it. So as you can see here, Jan Blachowicz, mentioned it there, 39 years old, 28-9 record, 8 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 11 decisions. He's the #1 ranked light heavyweight, of course, just losing his title to Glover Teixeira. Like I said, 39 years old, 6'2" with a 78-inch reach, same reach as Rakic. He's the former UFC light heavyweight champion. He's also a former KSW light heavyweight champion. He's the second Polish UFC champion in history, first male Polish champion, the first Polish champion, of course, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and he's a BJJ black belt. So a lot of accolades for Jan Blachowicz heading into this fight. Let's go all the way down to his record here. As we can see, Jan Blachowicz did not have an amateur debut. He didn't have any amateur fights, went straight to pro, and he had his MMA debut in February of 2007. Actually, interesting thing here, he lost his pro debut, as did Aleksandar Rakic. There's actually a few similarities between the two. We'll dig into that a little bit more as we move on, but MMA debut for Jan Blachowicz, February 2007. Didn't make his UFC debut until October of 2014 against Ira Latifi. Like I said, so that was a while back. And then obviously carved out his resume in KSW, fighting a number of UFC vets, Relic, Houston Alexander, Sokaju. So you can see there, very much battle tested before getting into the UFC. Now, in terms of his UFC record, quite a remarkable story. Jan Blachowicz doesn't actually have that great of a UFC record. He's 11-6 in the promotion. Some of his key wins include Jared Cannonier, Luke Rockhold, Corey Anderson, Dominic Reyes, and of course Israel Adesanya, which he got recently. And then his key losses here are also to Corey Anderson, who was able to avenge that later. Alexander Gustafsson, Pat Cummins, not really a notable loss, but he still did lose to him. We'll get into that fight a little bit later as well. And then obviously getting knocked out by Thiago Santos and then losing to Glover Teixeira in his last fight. One thing about Jan Blachowicz you got to give him credit for, this guy does not take time off. He's fighting about twice a year since basically he got in the UFC. No major layoffs. In terms of injuries, hasn't had a ton over his career, but we'll sort of get into it here. One interesting thing I think people forgot about, just as like a tidbit, doesn't really have any impact on this fight, was that he was supposed to fight Anthony Johnson at UFC 191. I forgot about that, and then he ended up having to fight Corey Anderson instead. So it was obviously Johnson was the one I believe who pulled out of the fight, and Corey Anderson got the fight instead. Another fight that was supposed to take place was Ovince St. Preux. He ended up getting an injury in that one. I went back and looked it up, couldn't figure out what the injury was. It was undisclosed. And then, of course, fighting Rakic on March 26th does not end up happening. He had a neck injury. Did have a chance to interview Jan Blachowicz ahead of this fight. So if you want to check out my interview on the UFC Interviews playlist, you can get his thoughts in a little bit more detail about the neck injury. It wasn't something freak. It was something that had been accumulated for years. So he got that fixed and he's all good to go. I don't believe he needed surgery for that. I think it was just sort of some rehab. But again, go check out the interview. You can get some takes on that for sure. Now, in terms of close fights, Glover typically is not in too many close fights, but just some of the ones I wanted to mention here. The Patrick Cummins fight at UFC 210. I was actually at that fight in Buffalo, April 2017. 10 media members scored the fight for Cummins. 6 scored it a draw. So some people felt like it could have been a draw. So again, that's one of those fights that, if it was a draw, obviously he's not having 6 losses in the UFC. He's only going to have 5. Another close fight he had was against Jacare Souza. back in 2019. It was a split decision. 9 media members scoring the fight for Jan Blachowicz, 7 scoring it for Jacare. So that's a fight again. Maybe, could have gone the other way in that one. And then, of course, the Israel Adesanya fight was somewhat close. I mean, I think he clearly won, but I actually went back and looked at the media scorecards. Get this, on MMA Decisions. That's the site where you can submit your scorecards. There were 7 media members who scored the fight for Israel Adesanya. I'm a little surprised by that. I thought Adesanya clearly lost the fight. Blachowicz took over. 19 media members scoring the fight for Jan, just to give a comparison. But did want to mention that because, again, there was some media that felt like Israel Adesanya did enough to win. Don't know about that, though. So there we go. That is Jan Blachowicz, the former light heavyweight champion. Again, brings a lot to the table. And again, a great story, too. Had a bit of a rough start to his UFC career, went on to win the championship, and, looking to bounce back here after losing his title to Glover Teixeira. Okay, let's get to Aleksandar Rakic. The Rocket, as they call him here. Also had a chance to speak to Alexander before this fight. You can find that on the UFC interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. Rakic, as you can see, is 14-2. He's got 9 knockouts, 1 submission, and 4 decisions. He's the number 3 ranked light heavyweight. He's 30 years old, born on the 6th of February. Jan Blachowicz was born on the 24th. So I talked about similarities here. They actually share the same month birthday, which is kind of interesting. Blachowicz is going to be a little bit shorter than Rakic in this fight. So Rakic is going to have he's going to have a slight height advantage here, just 2 inches. He's 6'4" compared to 6'2", and they both have a 78-inch reach. And of course, Rakic is going to be 9 years younger than Jan Blachowicz, so the youth definitely on his side. And while Jan Blachowicz is a BJJ black belt, Rakic is a BJJ brown belt, so a little bit of a difference there. Rakic also never had an amateur career, although it's interesting. You see, he had 2 canceled fights. I guess wasn't happening here, and this was, although I think this has got to be wrong because they have his amateur fights listed for 2014. He actually made his pro debut in 2011, so I don't know if that's a mistake on Tapology, but either way, wanted to point that out anyways. Made his MMA debut in October of 2011 with the loss. Like I mentioned, him and Blachowicz share that. They both have lost their pro debut. Actually, if you go and look at MMA history, there's a lot of really good fighters who lost their pro debut, which is kind of interesting. Adam Martin, my good friend, he did a story on this years ago, and it's kind of interesting, some of the names that lost their pro debut. Anyways, not important. What is important is that Rakic made his UFC debut back in September of 2017. Yeah, it's been a few years now. I feel like it's been longer that he's been in there, but yeah, had the debut against Francimar Barroso. And he's gone 6-1 in the UFC. We'll talk about that split decision loss to Volkan in just one second here. Some notable wins that he has. He doesn't have a ton of them. Jimmy Manning was on the edge of retirement at that point. Devin Clark, I know he's a mainstay in the UFC, but still not really a great win there. Jocelyn Ledette, I don't believe is with the UFC anymore. His 2 best wins by far are Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos, the 2 fights he's won recently. So that's something to keep in mind. His notable loss here is to Volkan Ozdemir. Again, Volkan's a notable loss because he is a ranked opponent. Now, one thing with Rakic, you can note is that he does not get injured. He hasn't had any fights that he's pulled out for injury, at least not in the UFC. And then the only close fight he's had is the Ozdemir fight. And I went back and looked at that. That was at UFC on ESPN 23 back in December of 2019. 1 media member scored the fight for Volkan Ozdemir. Not going to mention who that is. You can go check it out yourself. But 7 scored it for Rakic. So realistically, Rakic could be undefeated in the UFC if that fight goes his way. Again, a bit of a controversial decision there, and it was a split. So keep that in mind. So that's pretty much it with Rakic. Again, there's not a ton to take away from both guys here in terms of the resume, the stats, everything else. Currently, I haven't seen too many odds out for this fight yet, but let's just check it out anyways. A lot of the odds I'm seeing do have Rakic as the favorite here at -145. The comeback on Jan Blachowicz +125. I think that's where the line should be on this one, because again, like I said, Rakic does have some advantages in this fight. He is a little bit bigger, like I said, just slightly, a little bit of a height advantage there as well. But the key thing here is the age, right? As good as Blachowicz has looked, as good as he is, in winning the title and getting some impressive wins like over Reyes and some of the other names in the weight class. There's a 9-year age gap there, and I feel like with Rakic, he's maybe not the flashiest fighter, but he's a guy that can get it done. I think that's one of the key things with him is that he's going out there and being able to get some key wins. Like I said, other than the Ozdemir win, outside of that, he's looked pretty good as well. The other question is, was that fight against Glover Teixeira for Jan Blachowicz, was that a sign of him declining, or was it him having an off night? I tend to think it was an off night for him. I'm expecting a much better Jan Blachowicz in this fight, but is that enough to beat a guy like Aleksandar Rakic? I'm not entirely sure. So in terms of my pick here, I have to go with Aleksandar Rakic. I'm going to agree with the odds here. Because here's the thing. I know it's 5 rounds, so that does favor Jan because, he's been in more 5-round fights, to my knowledge. Could be wrong on that, but pretty sure he has, being the champion. But on top of that, like, how is he going to put away Rakic? I mean, again, Rakic has never been finished in his career. He has been hit a bit. I do want to point out the Devin Clark fight he had at UFC 231. Again, I was at that card live covering it. Devin cracked him pretty good in the first round. Rakic was able to recover, persevere, come back and get a finish himself. But go back and watch that fight because it wasn't like a flawless performance there for Rakic. So we know that he can get hit, and Jan does have that Polish power, right? We've seen him put out a number of guys with that knockout power. Luke Rockhold, Dominic Reyes. So we know he's capable of doing it, but at 39 years old right now, can he do that to Rakic? I don't know. And Rakic is a pretty smart fighter. That's one thing you got to give him credit for. A guy like Thiago Santos, who also has knockout power, he was able to go out there and sort of neutralize him. He dominated Anthony Smith. I thought he was close to finishing Smith in that fight. That's a good win considering, what Smith has done overall in that division. So I just think Jan's only chance of winning this fight is potentially going out there and knocking him out. And I just don't think that's going to happen over 5 rounds. Now, is he going to be able to out-wrestle him like he did with Israel Adesanya? I don't know. I think Rakic is, again, I spoke to him ahead of this fight. He's covering every angle here. I think, it's going to be hard to take Rakic to the ground and be able to sort of neutralize him there, especially with the fact that Rakic, like I said, has a very high fight IQ here. So my official pick for this fight is going to be Aleksandar Rakic by decision. Maybe he gets a late finish, but we really haven't seen him do that against high-level opposition. Like even Justin Ledet, when he fought him, 2 fights into his UFC career, he wasn't able to finish him. And Ledet's a guy who's been finished a number of times. Johnny Walker, we've seen a lot of guys go out there and finish Ledet. So that makes me think that it's probably going to be a closer fight. And again, I think there was an opportunity for him to finish Smith in that fight. He wasn't able to do it. So if he couldn't do it against Smith, I don't think he's going to do it against Jan Blachowicz. You're going to get better value on Rakic by decision than you would just straight up. So if you're looking to bet him, maybe you go that route as opposed to taking him straight up. But again, this is a 50-50 fight. Could Jan Blachowicz go out there and turn back Father Time and get the win? Absolutely. The odds are close for a reason. I think Jan Blachowicz absolutely can win this fight. But if I'm looking at the optics here, while Blachowicz does have more notable wins, he is a lot older. 9 years is a big age difference. And I think with Rakic, you're seeing him get better and better every fight, where it's like with Jan, we don't know. Plus, the slow UFC start for Jan as well. Like he's had some fights where he's lost. I know he seems to have turned a corner, but that Glover fight wasn't close at all. I mean, Glover dominated that fight. So with all that said, my official pick for this fight is going to be Aleksandar Rakic by decision. And hopefully this is the fight that's going to get him that title shot or the winner of Yuri Prochazka and Glover Teixeira. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who are you picking in this fight? Do you think Jan Blachowicz can bounce back from his loss to Glover Teixeira? Do you think Aleksandar Rakic will go out there and get it done like I say? Or do you think Rakic finishes the fight? He could. I don't know. We'll have to see. But based off everything I've seen here, I do feel better about picking Rakic as opposed to picking Jan Blachowicz. One more reminder, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. I'm putting videos on this channel every single day. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. That's the easiest way to know what I'm up to. I'm always posting content on there too, all my interviews, everything else. I know it's tough to keep track. And yeah, really excited for this fight coming up on May 14th, like I mentioned. My name is James Lynch. If you like this video, like I said, leave a comment. Let me know who you're picking. Definitely want to discuss this fight respectfully if we can and just sort of go over some angles and see who you guys are picking. So again, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time for another edition of Early Look. Oh, last thing, if there's any other notable fights you want me to preview, we just had a bunch of fight announcements. I've already made a list of some of the fights I'm going to talk about, but if there's a fight you want me to preview that's coming up, let me know in the comments. Would be happy to do it. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.